Hi, my name is Brandon Bishop, and I am single. By choice. Believe it or not, I know that's what all single people say, right? I'm single by choice. I don't like to, you know, not be tied down to anybody. In all actuality, I would love to meet somebody. If it clicks, right? So, what can be just awful about this episode? What is just awful about this short story? Well, let me tell you. This guy goes on a date with this girl named Julia, and a few years ago, I think it was 2018. And let's just say this is making me not look forward whatsoever to going on a first date. Ugh. It was a brisk October evening in 2018 when I agreed to meet Julia, a woman I'd only known through a dating app, for what was supposed to be a pleasant first date. Little did I know that this night would take a turn so bizarre and unsettling that it would haunt me for years. What began as a simple dinner turned into an encounter that defied logic, reason, and even reality. Here's what happened. I met Julia at a small, cozy Italian restaurant on the edge of town. The place was the kind of unassuming spot where you'd expect good food, soft music, and polite conversation. Julia was charming, with a warm smile and an air of mystery about her. There was something in the way she spoke, carefully chosen words, a slight hesitancy as if she were weighing every syllable, that hinted at secrets. We talked about everything from our favorite films to our worst travel mishaps. Yet beneath the surface of our light banter lay an undercurrent of unease that neither of us acknowledged. As dessert was served, Julia mentioned a strange local legend. "Have you ever heard about the old Greenfield Inn?" she asked softly, almost as if sharing a private secret. I admitted I'd heard bits and pieces, a place said to be cursed, where guests reported odd noises, lost time, and sightings of shadowy figures. Julia's eyes glinted as she continued. "I once had an experience there that changed everything for me." The mood at the table shifted, and though I was curious, a shiver of apprehension ran down my spine. I chalked it up to her trying to add a bit of thrill to our conversation. After all, who doesn't love a good ghost story on a first date? But as the night wore on, a subtle tension grew, as if we were being watched by unseen eyes. After dinner, as we stepped out into the cool night, Julia suggested we take a short walk along the river trail behind the restaurant. "I know a spot where the city lights fade and you can really appreciate the night," she said. Although the idea of a stroll sounded appealing, there was something off, almost as if she were drawing me away from the safety of the familiar. I hesitated briefly but decided to follow her lead, thinking it might make for an interesting story to tell someday. We ambled down the shadowed streets until we reached a narrow path leading to the outskirts of town. The path was lit only by the dim glow of streetlights that flickered intermittently. With each step, the chill in the air deepened, and the usual sounds of the city gave way to an eerie silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were trespassing into a place that didn't belong to the living. After a few minutes, Julia stopped abruptly in front of a decrepit building overrun with ivy and decay. "This is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where I need you to come with me." The building was unmistakable, the Greenfield Inn, abandoned for years and steeped in local lore. I remembered the stories. Guests who'd vanished, inexplicable noises, and sightings of figures in old-fashioned clothing roaming the halls. But what startled me most was Julia's expression, equal parts longing and dread. Inside, the corridor was dim and heavy with the scent of mildew and lost memories. We moved slowly, the only sounds being our cautious footsteps and the distant drip of water. The air seemed to thicken as we advanced deeper into the inn, and I felt an inexplicable pressure, as if the walls themselves were trying to communicate something. In a small, dust-filled lounge, Julia led me to a faded portrait hanging crookedly on the wall. This was my great-grandmother, she murmured, her eyes fixed on the image of a stern woman in period clothing. She was a caretaker here, long before the inn fell into ruin. I listened, rapt, as she recounted how her great-grandmother had been the keeper of the inn's secrets, and how, on a night much like this one, something inexplicable had occurred that shattered her life. Julia's tone was a mix of sorrow and determination, as if she were on a mission to uncover a truth that had been buried for generations. As Julia spoke, I couldn't help but notice that her mannerisms, the subtle tilt of her head, and the almost hypnotic cadence of her words all seemed oddly rehearsed. It was as if she were more than just a passionate descendant of a long-lost family. And then, in the silence that followed her story, a soft creak echoed through the hallway. At first, I assumed it was just the building settling, but then it happened again, closer this time, accompanied by a whisper that I could almost make out. "Leave," it said. My heart pounded as I glanced at Julia, who only offered a cryptic smile. "It's just the inn's way of reminding us that some doors should never be opened," she replied. I tried to laugh it off, but a cold sweat had broken out on my forehead. We continued through the maze-like corridors until we reached a locked door with a tarnished brass handle. Julia paused, running her fingers over the handle as if seeking reassurance. "This door," she explained, "is where the truth is kept. I need you to open it with me." Against my better judgment, I fumbled with my phone to use its flashlight, a poor substitute for a proper source of light in such an eerie environment. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room lined with old furniture and scattered photographs. Among the artifacts, one item caught my eye, a diary, its leather cover cracked and worn by time. Julia's hand trembled as she reached for it, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes, a spark of both hope and deep-seated pain. Julia began to read aloud from the diary in a hushed tone, recounting events that seemed too surreal to be true. The diary described a night much like our own, when a group of strangers had come to the inn seeking refuge from a raging storm. But the night had taken a dark turn as inexplicable events unfolded, doors slamming shut on their own, unearthly sounds echoing through the halls, and one by one, the guests had vanished without a trace. Her voice grew softer as she read a passage that mentioned a final, desperate plea from a woman who claimed she had been betrayed by someone close, a betrayal that led to a curse upon the inn. "They say that on a night when the veil between worlds is thin, the spirit of the wronged returns to claim what was taken," Julia whispered, almost to herself. The words sent a chill down my spine, and for a moment I questioned whether I should be there at all. As the minutes ticked by, the inn itself seemed to come alive with unseen forces. Shadows shifted in the corners of my eyes, and an almost imperceptible hum filled the silence. I could feel my pulse quickening, my rational mind warring with an inexplicable primal fear. At one point, as Julia flipped a page in the diary, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. But when I turned to look, there was nothing, just the dark, empty hallway staring back at me. Then, in an instant that felt both interminable and fleeting, the lights in the room flickered and died, plunging us into near-total darkness. For a few agonizing moments, I sat frozen, straining to make sense of the sudden silence, and then through the pitch black, I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sobbing sound, echoing from the far end of the room. Before I could react, Julia's hand gripped mine tightly. "We need to leave," she said urgently, her voice shaking. I nodded, my heart hammering in my chest, and together we made our way back through the labyrinthine corridors of the inn. With each step, the oppressive atmosphere deepened, as if the building itself was reluctant to let us escape its clutches. When we finally reached the entrance, the cool night air felt like a lifeline. I turned to thank Julia for what I assumed was a shared moment of courage in the face of something inexplicable, but she was already looking away, her eyes filled with a sorrow that I couldn't quite place. "I'm sorry," she murmured almost inaudibly. It wasn't until much later, when I was alone in my car trying to steady my racing heart, that I began to piece together the true horror of that night. I remembered the details of Julia's story, her mention of a betrayal, and the diary's account of a woman wronged,
a creeping suspicion began to take root in my mind. What if Julia wasn't just a curious descendant of the inn's past? What if she was, in some inexplicable way, connected to the curse itself? In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Julia. I decided to do some digging, checking old public records, scouring local history forums, and even talking to a few longtime residents. What I discovered was chilling. Several decades ago, on a stormy night much like the one at the inn, a young woman had vanished without a trace. Her name was Eleanor, and she had been the subject of local legends ever since. Eleanor was known to have been deeply in love with a man who ultimately betrayed her, leading to her untimely death. Rumors swirled that her spirit was bound to the inn, doomed to seek retribution on those who wronged her, or, in some twisted version of fate, those who came to uncover her tragic story. The records revealed that Eleanor had a striking resemblance to Julia, the same dark hair, the same expressive eyes, the same melancholic smile. A chilling realization began to form. Julia's story wasn't just an echo of her family history. It was a mirror of Eleanor's tragic fate.
In a final twist that I can barely put into words, I received an unexpected message on my phone, a text from an unknown number. It simply read, "Some things are better left undiscovered." Attached was a faded photograph of the Greenfield Inn on that fateful night, and in the background, barely visible among the shadows, was a woman whose face bore an uncanny likeness to Julia. My blood ran cold as I stared at the image, the truth settling in like a heavy shroud. Julia wasn't just a passionate descendant seeking to unravel the mysteries of the inn. She might have been Eleanor all along, or a vessel for her tortured spirit. The first date that I thought would be a simple foray into romance had become a gateway into a decades-old tragedy, and I was left wondering if I had ever truly met the woman I'd thought I knew. Conclusion. That night changed everything for me. I left the inn not just with a story to tell, but with an unsettling understanding of how the past can reach out and shape the present in the most unexpected ways. The Greenfield Inn still stands, a silent monument to secrets best left buried, and sometimes I wonder if the ghost of that first date still lingers, reminding us all that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. For anyone who thinks that a first date is just a harmless meeting of two people, remember, sometimes, beneath the veneer of normalcy, lies a tale so dark and twisted that it blurs the line between love, tragedy, and the paranormal. And sometimes, the person you think you're meeting might just be a ghost from the past, waiting for their chance to be heard.
So I'm trying to think of when the last first date I actually went on was. It's been a while, okay? So if you're single and you're a lovely person and you don't think I'm hideous in any way, and maybe you like my voice, I can do the radio voice, I can do that sexy nighttime radio voice, sit by the fire and listen to just awful, horrible stories about horrible instances and sometimes horrible people. Did that do it for you? No? Okay, well, if in fact it does, or just reach out. You and I could be on a first date. Not you, sir. I'm sorry. No, I know, whatever. It's 2025. It's just, okay, thank you. We could be our next first date, and I hope it goes a lot better than it did for the people in our story today. Please like this video if you like this video, if you like this short story. Please hit subscribe because we're going to keep giving them to you every single week. Sound good? Sounds great. I'm Brandon Bishop, and I'll see you next week. And online dating sucks. I'm just going to end it with that. It's terrible.